welcome to another Scots Whay podcast, and today I am joined by Staff Director Roxana Haines. Hello, Roxana.
Hello, lovely to be here.
We're going to start with a question that we've kind of asked everyone who's sat in the seat that you're in, and just could you explain your role in the company?
Absolutely. So I have been at Scottish Opera now full-time since January this year, and there are kind of three main strands to the role of staff director. The first one is kind of, as it says on the tin, to be an assistant director for the main stage shows that go on here that then go on to do the tour. So I make sure that the vision of the director is achieved by all departments and link everyone together.
Right, okay.
So that's one. The second one is that I get to direct some of the smaller scale productions like opera highlights and other semi-stagings across the year, which is very exciting for me. I get to curate and be the director as well. And then the third strand is advocating for those other assistant directors or the kind of creative companies that come in to make the shows. So making sure they have what they need, making sure we're forward planning and making sure that we're including what they are looking for when we're planning the whole season.
Okay, so it's a lot of collaboration with nearly everyone else involved.
Absolutely, that's why I love the job. You speak to everybody, all the communication's there, and it's collaboration with everybody.
So how did you get to this role? Could you give us a little bit about your background in theatre and in opera?
Sure, so you hit the nail on the head. My background is mostly in the theatre, actually. I studied English and drama at Goldsmiths in London, and then did my postgrad degree at drama school at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, which one needs a master's to pronounce correctly. And I did that in a course called Advanced Theatre Practice, which was essentially looking at that collaborative theatre, looking at how everybody works together to be able to make a show or production. So that's kind of my routine. And then immediately before working in this role, I was the assistant director at Scottish Opera for Ariadne af Naxos, directed by Anthony MacDonald, back in 2018. And that was the kind of my introduction to Scottish Opera properly, and me being able to see that there was potentially a future with this company, and certainly that I wanted there to be one.
Yes, because I looked on your website at the things you'd worked on in the past, and I thought, well, we can't mention all of these because it would take the whole podcast. You've been very busy, it seems to me. But how has the role changed through all those different, I guess, how have you seen yourself develop in the role through everything that you've worked on?
What an excellent question. I think that I have become more confident in embracing that I am not just a creative of one discipline.
Yeah.
The work that I love the most is when we are collaborating with other people, with other art forms, cross-disciplinary, and so the more work I do that kind of encompasses all of those different elements of what art is, but also why we make art, the work with communities, the work with youth companies, working with people with dementia. So I suppose I've become more confident in accepting that I love doing each of those aspects. I love all of those elements within a project, and that's okay. I can work on the main stage and assist professionals, but also I can work with children with Asperger's and help them make a show as well. And I can do both things. Because
it's an interesting point I hadn't thought about, but having done quite a few of these podcasts now, and the level of collaboration across the whole company is fascinating. And educational, but as well as the productions and all of those things.
It's why opera is amazing.
Yeah.
Because it pulls together every element of art, and in a way that sometimes we don't always realise when we're in the spectator seat, but actually it has to include all of these different things for it to be the art form that it is.
And I think often people feel, oh, what I have to do is one thing and I have to do that as well as I can, which is great. But what you're saying is true. No, it's okay to enjoy doing lots of things well and enjoying each aspect of it. So not one becomes maybe primary, but they all work together.
Absolutely.
Because I was looking at the training that you'd done as well, and the puppetry, physical theatre and movement. It just made me think that's involved in opera. All of those things are involved in opera.
Absolutely, and I think we're beginning to tell stories in those different ways too, and opera is perhaps a little late to the game, but now we see it everywhere. We see operas all across the country, all across Europe, that are including these different ways, these different art forms and ways of telling stories. The videography, the puppetry, like you said, using it through movement as well. And even working with with instrumentalists that are maybe multidisciplinary, that can play characters as well, God forbid, against those singers that have trained for so long, that maybe even the instruments can be characters too.
Yeah.
So there's kind of all these different ways of telling stories, and opera is just such a rich art form to do that. So yeah, and I'm blessed to be able to share each of these skills or these qualities in what I'm able to do. Sometimes it's like a toolbox. Sometimes someone says to me, okay, well, what can we do, or what do we need? And I say, well, I've got these different things we can see what works next, what you need me for, how else I can help the project.
So, with a background in theatre, what do you think opera has or adds to theatre?
The musicality.
Yeah.
Obviously is a clear one, but also there's a sense of a fixed time frame that comes with the world of opera and comes with music generally, that theatre seems to sometimes is more flexible with. That's the main difference that I spot when I work back in theatre, that there is so much time between words, between syllables,
right.
And you can be playful. You'll find actors are still playful with that timing or with that shift when you're making a show, whereas with opera it is fixed.
Mm-hmm.
We have the conductor in front of us to tell us how to count the time, to tell us when a bar is longer, to tell us how to measure that, so we're all measuring it in the same way. And I think that theatre could take some of that from the world of opera, and vice versa, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I think that there can sometimes, we've not reached a state of post-structuralism within opera yet. The playwright, the author, the composer is still not dead.
Yes.
In many of these cases, Mozart's work is sacred, and he, would be rolling in his grave if he knew we were taking an axe to his work. And yet, we see these different beautiful productions of Shakespeare all the time.
Yeah.
So I think that there is something to be said on both of those parts, and that theatre can learn from opera in the way that it respects its work and the time frame, like I said, but also that opera can learn from theatre in that way too.
And is that partly from the demands is the wrong word, but the expectations of the audience? I remember when there was a lot of new Shakespeare productions in the 80s and 90s, and there were people saying, but this is sacred, we should not be doing this, we shouldn't be having, it's set in 1940 Chicago or something like that. And I do wonder if there's still a little bit of that with an audience expectation of how a Mozart or an opera should be.
You're totally right. I think there always will be. But Shakespeare didn't create those stories either. Mm-hmm. He stole the stories from Ovid before, and from classic Greek plays. So there's a sense of these stories and these characters being revived through these different ways of telling stories. We don't go to see Tosca because we don't know the story. Most people know the story.
Yeah.
We don't see Romeo and Juliet because we don't know what the ending is.
We know how it goes.
Shakespeare, he tells us at the very beginning of the play how it's going to end, but we go to see how the story is told, and I think that's where opera could be, could give that as an offering of the art form. Okay, how are we going to tell this story now? And even more important sometimes, why are we telling this story now?
Another thing that has surprised me, I guess, a little bit since I've started going to opera regularly is the level of performance. And what I mean by that, it's not just people singing, they're acting as well. And that struck me recently at the Opera Highlights show that you're directing at the moment, was there's comedy and there's tragedy and everything in between. And it really comes across in the performances. And is that something which is new to opera, or has that kind of always been there?
I think that the industry, and like you say, the audience as part of that industry of opera goers, of opera makers, require a lot from opera performers. And I use that word specifically. I'm not saying opera singers, because I think that conservatoires are training these well-rounded singers, and people are now realising that we're asking much more of them than that. Because sometimes, for Ariadne F. Naxos, we asked Jennifer France to be on a trapeze. There are more circus elements being involved, like you said, the movement, the dancing that's coming up for us in gondoliers. We require a lot from these performers because of the way we tell stories. And that's magical. That's why the art form is so great. And that's why there's such a great respect from me, certainly, for anyone who has the patience and the the gut passion to be an opera performer, to know and to have that buzz inside you that actually I can make that. I can do that with my body.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to remind myself, I pinch myself sometimes in rehearsal rooms when I remember that this is my job. I get to sit 3 meters away from, from these incredible performers and be present whilst my body is vibrating with the noise that, is coming out of them. It really is incredible.
Well, let's talk about the Opera Highlights tour, because I think I've seen a few of them now, and what strikes me is you get that sense of the power of the voice as well as the level of performance, because they're often in smaller spaces. So maybe it's best that you kind of explain what the Opera Highlights tour is.
Absolutely. When I came to work on Ariadne af Naxos in 2018, I walked into an office and I looked up at the board and there was a big map of Scotland. And I looked at it and I saw all the little red dots of the places it was going to visit. And I think I said, maybe audibly, maybe in my head, can't remember, I'd love to work on that project. And when I realised that it was opera scenes, that then, and lots of difficulty comes with a show where you're picking out different music highlights, right? These different operatic gems from across the years of opera. And so it really is about your cast. And I stand by that, the sense of requiring a cast to totally go with you on this journey of we've got these 4 weeks to make a show. But I was blessed with a fantastic cast of these opera performers that we were talking about. And each of them brought something that was very surprising to the show, but also they brought a lot of themselves. And lots of them are in the show, in the different characters, but also, five brains are infinitely better than one. And with our fantastic pianist as well, Ian Shaw, it's just the more people that you suddenly got in that room, the better it becomes. And I'd done a lot of work beforehand to kind of excavate all the text and the musical language and working out how we could curate a narrative that was enjoyable for audiences, because the whole idea, if we're going to these different remote places to give people a little moment, a little afternoon, an evening of opera, it should be enjoyable. You should get all of the passion and the heartbreak that comes with opera, because you can't avoid any of those things.
No.
And you should still have the same quality in terms of voice and music, but also in terms of what you get given in lighting and set and and stagecraft. So I came at it from that angle. I wanted it to be an evening of entertainment, an evening at the opera, that someone could come in their glad rags or have rocked up in their Wellington boots, hence the wellies being in the show.
Yeah. And you talked about the map of Scotland, and that's exactly what you do. You take it round the whole of Scotland, to town halls and to church halls and to any kind of relevant space. What's the feedback like as you take it out? Because I've seen it, I think Cumbernauld, Motherwell, Eastwood Theatre, so it's always been just in and around Glasgow, where people who might go to the opera in Glasgow, it's not far for them to go elsewhere. But what about these more remote places? What's the feedback?
So I was really curious about this as well, and what I wanted to try and do was remove the sense of performance about it and make the show the same thing that we're doing, right? So the show tours, but also the whole concept of the performance is about it being setting up for a party. So part of that is at the back of the theatre, once we've done in the interval or at the end of the show, there is a tree, and people can write their feedback on the tree. So you can give us immediate feedback, and then the feedback tree, if you will, grows as the tour grows and goes around Scotland. The feedback has been really beautiful. Yeah. And I think it is, it's lovely to get that immediate response from an audience, and it's part of the lovely thing that the cast are invited to go out to the front of the playing space at the end of the show and offer these moments of interaction. Because all too often you don't get that in opera. You don't get that on the stage usually. So the feedback that we've been getting is that it is a high art form, and that they are very grateful that's been brought to their church hall or their post office. It's not a post office, but you know what I mean. Yeah. It could be. Yeah. And that they want more. People want more of this kind of work to go round. We try to go to different venues every year, so that we're constantly taking it to different places and trying to find these new beautiful venues, because at the heart of every community is somewhere like this.
Yes.
And that's all that opera really is. It's just about coming in and telling stories. And so that's why I think the project is so magical as a whole.
And I mean, I won't spoil anything for anyone who hasn't seen it, but you right from the start, you have this interaction with the audience and the performers on stage, perhaps more than any show that I've seen previously. The reaction that you often get, though, is when people maybe haven't seen opera live. It's, you were saying about sitting in a room and, you know, almost vibrating from the power of people's voices. That's the thing. You always get gasps when some people hit certain notes or have that powerful thing.
You feel them,
yes, absolutely,
in your body. You know, sometimes there are certain notes that certain people will respond to. Sometimes you get it when a lorry goes past you really quickly and it hits the right frequency in your gut. People get that with opera singers too. You can have a really visceral, physical response to it, and that's okay.
Yes,
it's
of
okay
course,
to
it's
feel
great.
like that.
It's amazing. I mean, it can be a bit discombobulating when you get
Absolutely,
that.
it was for me. You know, I don't come from a background that had opera in it from growing up. I wasn't in a family that had classical music either. I came to it much later, and that I kind of had to learn that for myself. I had to learn it was okay to cry.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you get so emotional, and part of that in Opera Highlights was that I wanted people to know it was okay to laugh as well.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of comedy interwoven there as well. But it's a real show about life. You know, there are lots of key moments of life in the show, because as a catch-all, you know, as a narrative that might relate to anyone, those moments might relate to anyone that could come and see the piece.
And how difficult is it to come up with, because you say it's different songs from different operas, and to get that balance right must take a while.
It really does. I can't underplay it. I worked on this project for 6 months before I took it to the cast, but it was because I wanted to take it seriously. And so I kind of, like I said, I do think about it as excavating. So I pull back all the layers of it. I work out what the core element of the language is saying, how this character is feeling, whether they're feeling it about another character if it's a duet. And then I arrange them out on a table. You know, I'm lucky to have Derek Clark, who's here as our head of music, and he to be able to pick those pieces for us already. So half of the hard work is done. All I'm doing is kind of pulling together a through line, and I needed it to be real. I needed these characters to be real, so we have that empathy and that compassion on stage. And I kind of, which is why I required the cast to help me and to collaborate on the project too. So I pitched them a skeleton outline that I thought could work. There were some options that could have gone either way, and that's where we found lots of the moments of disguise and the kind of the other general opera cliches that arrive in the Opera Highlights show. I was joking with a colleague the other day that I should have given audience members a bingo card to tick off all of the opera cliches they see, because it might have worked.
But it's interesting as a member of the audience, because what I like about them is there are songs that you'll know and melodies that you'll know, whether it's from operas or whether used in movies or even adverts or something like that, and then you'll get the ones that, you know, are, some of them are brand new, written specifically, and other ones, you know, are from rarer operas and things like that. So is it that idea that you want in some ways to have recognisable pieces and then you can introduce new things? Is that a consideration?
It is, and it's about sharing. It's about sharing our love of the music and of this way of telling stories with other people. And so naturally with that, some of the songs you might know, like, you know, the Gondoliers, or like you said with the Flower Duet being the BA advert, that kind of stuff is things that people might recognise, even if they don't quite know why they recognise it or where they recognise it from. But then even for us, even for the performers, some of the songs that Derek had picked were ones that they had never come across before either. I'd never heard of the Ruddigore duet, which is gorgeous, and I would now love to do that piece. And similarly, the Vaughan Williams Blue Larkspur in a Garden duet for tenor and soprano is just one of the most magical things I've ever heard. You know, and our encore, which was is a gem picked by Derek as well. But we really do rely on his brain, on his fantastic knowledge and the kind of the depth and breadth of opera, operetta, light music, you know, everything, to then to then take it with that joy and to lace through a narrative that we can then present.
Yeah. When you go to see it at Theatre Royal, obviously part of the projection of voice is to reach the back of it and that. And then having seen it in a few civic centres and halls now, you really are kind of like literally kind of blown away. I'm just thinking if you were in, you mentioned the post office or the equivalent, then that would be quite something. It would be really a really powerful thing to kind of see.
And to be part of,
Yeah.
like that's the kind of, you were saying about the interaction and the engagement at the beginning of the show, that I really did want the audience to feel like they were the ones invited to the party, and the performers are there as well. They also don't know whose party it is.
Yes.
That's just the way.
Well, it worked a treat. I don't think I've ever seen any kind of theatre stage where the people on stage seem to be so invested and so enjoying it as much as they were, and that just feeds into the audience as well, because then, as you say, it feels not only that they're able to laugh, but they're able to relax as well. They're having a great time, and so we're allowed to have a great time, and that's what any kind of theatre should do. To move away from it, I could talk to you about opera highlights for a long time, I have to say, but you've also directed Foxtrot.
Yes, I did.
So explain a little bit about that.
So Fox-tot is the education department's here, new commission by a composer called Liam Patterson. Liam wrote the Bambino, which happened last year and did its wonderful, big, very successful tour. So Fox-tot is its sister, essentially.
Right. Okay.
And it is for the next age group up. It's for 12 to 24 months, 1 to 2 years. So we're talking toddlers. We're talking brand new territory.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I did a lot of work on the kind of the development age here and looking at the different places where they are neurologically, but also what they're exploring physically, where they are in their space. And we wanted to create a character that could be relatable to this. So Fox is the same height as a toddler, and so is on eye line all the time. And Fox isn't quite sure what it's like to be a fox yet.
Right.
And kind of explores its surroundings and its world and pulls away from its parent, from Vixen, in a similar way that the toddlers are experiencing the world just now. So the whole space, designed by Giuseppe and Emma Belli, is a free roam space. So it's a big kind of dance floor with beautiful leaf patterns and gorgeous different blues and oranges that the children are totally able to roam in and pick up leaves and put them in their mouth, stick them up their nose, whatever they want to do with them. So it's a free state for them to follow Fox on this journey of finding who Fox is.
And what was the reaction of your tots?
Oh, it was beautiful. I went to lots and lots of those shows. Lots of the time as a director, you have to leave your project to let it go and roam. But there was something in me that couldn't quite leave Fox-tot because of the joyful responses.
Yeah.
Every show was different because the children were encouraged to engage and to make it their own thing. And a highlight for me was that we had incorporated some sign language into the choreography of the show. So the general physical language was one of some very simple BSL, and I am indebted to Jamie Rhea and to Jennifer Bates who helped me with that. And so for some of the children that came, there was a little boy who came and had 2 hearing aids in, and suddenly I think maybe that audience member and parent wouldn't have been able to experience the show in the same way.
Sure.
And they didn't bring their child knowing that it was going to be accessible in that way, but actually it made a big difference to them. And just little tiny things like that. And also there's puppetry in that too, and so the children stealing the tail of the fox, and then the whole story goes up in the air and we have to try something else because the tail isn't where it should be. And the Bellies created these enormous versions of the sun and the moon on gimbals that were tactile. So the sun was yellow and fluffy, and the moon had these incredible, our props department here were incredible with it, had these like craters in them, and with these little holes, there were different textures and fabrics that looked like anemones. It was incredible. So the children would literally gravitate towards these objects when they came on stage, and would, by the end of it, would help push the sun on its orbit, which for me was the most satisfying thing, because they're able to take part in the storytelling.
It's such an important thing to do. I'm thinking when I first started going to theatre with my parents or whatever, and it was very much, children are seen and not heard, and sit still and don't fidget and all these kind of things. And there was a little bit of, oh, this is an adult world. It's not really for me yet, if it ever is. But yeah, to introduce them at that age to every aspect of it, this is okay. It's okay to enjoy this in any way that you see fit.
Yeah, to make
Such
noise
an
as well.
incredible thing to do.
Parents were very tentative and wanted to hold their children back a lot of the time, or to shush them. But so we frequently would have to tell parents, you can let them go. They are safe. We have made a safe world for them to explore. So they don't quite believe us all the time, but it's true.
So what are you doing next? What's next for you?
So I am currently assistant director on Tosca,
Right.
which we are in our last week of studio rehearsals for. We head into the theatre next week, and that is bound to be a fantastic production.
Yeah.
It's the Anthony Besh revival from 1980, and yet it still has this amazing poignancy and relative connection to today, especially with all the political spheres that are being thrown up. The production is set in 1943, so there's still a sense of now about it,
Yeah.
and about something that's still very much present in our minds. And then I am working on almost every show at Scottish Opera next year. So I'll be on Nixon in China, then I get the pleasure of reviving Opera Highlights with a new cast, then we'll do Midsummer Night's Dream, and I'll be then reviving Fox-tot, and then we move into Gondoliers and Utopia Limited. So it's a busy year.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule by the sounds of it to talk to us, Roxana. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And we'll be back soon with someone else from Scottish Opera. Cheers.